So, in today's episode of Diaries of a First Time Mum, this is going to cover my labour and birth story with our firstborn, who is 14 today. So let's get into it. Okay, so on February the 24th, 2010, I went to hospital for a checkup as I had stomachache and I'd felt like I'd weed a little bit. Unaware that your waters can just trickle. I was 39 weeks, so did not expect it, and I'd been working all day, as at the time I worked as a hairdresser and I was doing mobile. So at around 5:30 we went to the hospital, and I remember walking up to the hospital entrance, which is on a hill, and I was having to stop every kind of 5 minutes, totally unaware, because obviously at this point I had completely no knowledge of labour and birth and what to expect when having a baby. So I was monitored for an hour, and there was only two midwives on, but it was really busy, so we was doing a lot of waiting about. They said everything was fine, there was a small amount of protein in my wee, and they'd monitor me for an hour and then see what the plan is. Now, bearing in mind at this point, my husband was at a job interview, so I was there with my mum, and so he was like, just carry on doing what you're doing and then we'll see what happens and we'll let you know. Bearing in mind that while I was on this monitor, I definitely knew something didn't feel right, and I'd seen that the tightening seemed to be making a number on the machine. So anyway, after an hour, the midwife came to check and found I was having contractions every 5 minutes, and they were lasting around 30 seconds at this point. They told me I'd be in very early labour and got a doctor to come and check me and do an examination. At this point, when the examination was taking place, I was already 6 centimetres and totally unaware. So basically I was staying in from this point anyway. My mum rang Jamie and was like, oh, we've got some progress, think about maybe making your way back down this way. So he's gone rushing through this interview, telling them that, my girlfriend's having a baby and I need to go, and they thought that he was just trying to get through the queue a lot quicker, I think. Also to note, at this point, I was totally not ready for going to the hospital. The baby's bags was packed, but mine was not. So now we also needed him to go on the way to the hospital and get all the maternity things from Asda. So over the next kind of period of time, I remember I was stood up, I was rocking, I was moving. For me, I felt that that's what I needed to do. I needed to work with whatever was happening, whatever them sensations were. I remember that they brought the gas and air in and said, if you feel like you want to use that, then use that. And then I kind of felt like I needed to sit down, but obviously sitting down was too uncomfortable. So I went and got in a bath. And that is, again, something that I tell all my parents to think about. If you're in a labour ward and they don't have a birth pool, then ask to see if there's a bath that you can use, because it's absolutely fine to do that. All the bathrooms have red cards in, so if there was a problem, then you could pull it and the midwives would come in anyway. So by the time that Jamie got to the hospital, I was in full-blown labour by this point, and I was around 8 centimetres. It progressed very quickly, but again, I had absolutely no thoughts about what should happen in labour. Bearing in mind, I didn't even know you had to birth the placenta. So then we was moved to a actual birthing room on labour ward. So at this point, it was in like a side room, but they were very busy, and I remember them just saying, we need to just wait for this space to come available, and then we'll move you in. So I literally walked like a few doors down, and it was a lot of a bigger room with like the resuscitator set up for the baby and all the rest of the stuff that's needed for labour. And at this point, they wanted to monitor me continuously because my pulse and the baby's heartbeat were the same, so they couldn't differentiate it. They tried that, it didn't work, and then it says here that they offered to break my waters and put a monitor on the baby's head. Obviously now I'm totally aware that it's not just a little clip as I'd imagined in my head. At this point, the things I was using to get through the labour was gas and air. Again, did not know my preferences or options, didn't even know what was available, and eating ice, but that is something that I'd done all the way through my pregnancy, along with sniffing tyres. So I basically used to carry around with me a hot water bottle with no cover on it, because it was that smell that I absolutely craved. So that, ice and gas and air was what I used for labour. The next thing that came was I was very dehydrated, and this is another thing I'm really kind of go on about to my parents about staying hydrated from the minute you go into labour. Start drinking your isotonic drinks, start drinking your fluids, make sure you're drinking, and then make sure you go into the toilet. Really important. So then I had a drip put on, so fluid drips now being on, and we're now in this other room, and I was stood up at the side of the bed, I remember that, and it just says that quickly the feeling and the urge to push came over me, and I remember panicking, thinking, I don't know what to do, what's going on, why do I feel like something's changed? And I remember the midwife just saying, work with it, just, see how you feel, see what's working, and then I remember that we was kind of getting somewhere, and I remember we stood up, then we was on the bed, and we was like on all fours holding on to the back of the bed, and I was pushing with all my might basically. And then basically when the midwife found that there was kind of little progress, that's when they was like, right, we need to see what's going on and possibly think about the next option if the baby's not born. So when the midwife looked down below and saw what was going on and saw that the baby was at a position where she was unable to kind of get past the point to crowning, that's when I remember that the red buzzer goes off. Obviously everyone comes running in and assessing the situation. So at this point, this would have technically been a forceps birth, 1,000,000%, and if not, an unplanned caesarean. But as it happened, at this moment, there was no doctors available on the unit or within the vicinity of the unit to do an assisted birth or a caesarean birth. So a really senior midwife came into the room and made the decision to do an episiotomy, see if that helped baby's head kind of descend and seeing if things changed, which it didn't. At this point now, baby's heart rate is dropping as well. So the decision was made to extend that episiotomy, which again doesn't happen that often, but in this case there was no other option. And I genuinely remember the midwife just saying, we've got to get this baby out, she needs to come out, and she needs to come out now. And I just remember kind of pushing with all my might, and obviously she got to the point of being born. So when she came out, obviously she was kind of born in not a great condition because of that birth and that kind of prolonged bit at the end. So after she went and kind of was checked over and everything else, and that's when the midwife said, right, what are your thoughts on the injection for birthing the placenta? And I was like, I'm not doing anything else. What do you mean? I don't want to do anything else. And that's when she said, you've got to birth the placenta, and this is me who had absolutely no idea that I was about to do something else. And obviously it wasn't anywhere near as traumatic as I thought it was going to be, but I absolutely did not have a clue. So obviously then you was brought back to us and everything was fine, and obviously on inspection there was a 2nd degree tear which needed repairing by the midwife, and that all happened in the room. And I remember having her just in cuddles whilst that was happening. Then we was left and everything to do kind of that undisturbed time, kind of post, I suppose, episiotomy repair. It was a little bit different back then, but then again, being short staffed, we was just asked to kind of, when you feel ready, just get up, go for a shower, have a freshen up. And it was at that point for me when I did stand up, forgetting how long you've been laid down for and things. I did have a PPH, kind of a large blood loss post birth, which obviously then kind of scares you a little bit more as well, I think. And obviously it's things that you're then more aware of going forward when you have other children and things. Yeah, so that is kind of the labour and birth story for my first baby, and she weighed £7.15, born at 39 weeks.